Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. What did your a-hole neighbor do? Part 2. When I was a teenager and lived with my parents, we had this one neighbor family that seemed sorta off. One day the father knocks on our door and tells my parents they haven't had power for a long time and begged to run an extension cord to one of our outside outlets for the day so his young kids could have cold milk with their cereal in the morning. My parents agreed to do this for one day. The neighbor kept up their part and disconnected the cable after that day. A week later, they hook it back up again without us noticing. A month goes by and our electricity bill is basically double what it normally is. Parents head to the backyard and find the cable plugged in, yank it out, and confront the neighbor. At first, the father doesn't show his whole body and cracks the door, but my stepdad gets him to open up the door after pointing out that he is concealing a gun. He didn't have to pull the gun out. Stepdad demands an explanation as to why the cable was run to our outlet, and the dude just sorta mumbles incoherently and shuts the door, locking it. Bad Neighbor family was in a duplex, and their neighbor, sharing the building, comes around and asks what's up. Parents explain the whole story and how the next step was calling the police. Good Neighbor is a former police chief and is friends with the entire force. He offers to make the call. Several cop cars arrive. Bad Neighbor father and mother are arrested. Turns out they were running a meth lab inside the house. The mother was AP and the kids, a boy and a girl between ages 7 to 10, were malnourished. The kids were put into foster care. No other bad neighbor has beat that high score yet. He used to stand on the footpath drunk every afternoon and yell to my husband about what a bee I was. Once my husband told him to go home and he shaped up to try and punch my husband, who was around 50 years younger than the neighbor. My infraction? He rang one day to be nosy, check why my husband's car was home on a work day. I politely thanked him for his call and let him know my husband was sleeping and had a cold, nothing to worry about. Apparently, I was meant to praise him profusely for being such a caring neighbor, and my husband was meant to follow up with a call once he was awake and also lavish him with praise for caring. Because we didn't, we got to hear about it loudly every afternoon until we moved several months later. Late last year, mine said he'll bash me because I got his driveway wet while I had the sprinkler going to water my yard. Not even joking, he flipped his S over his driveway getting water on it. He's a drug addict, so yeah. Jerry. When I moved in, he seemed eccentric but harmless. Apparently my landlord had a conversation with him and told him to leave me alone. This upset Jerry greatly. He cornered me one day while I was unlocking my door and asked me to come sit with him in his apartment. I don't think the place had ever been cleaned and he had hoarder mentalities. He drank a bottle of wine in about 30 minutes, commenting on all the sad things in his life. Luckily he passed out so I could leave. A couple weeks later, he got into a 3 a.m. fight with his boyfriend, which resulted in his boyfriend trying to get into my apartment for safety and eventually breaking into an empty unit down the hall. Cops were called and Jerry was taken to jail. About 6 weeks after that, same boyfriend was over and a fight ensued. This time it ended in very loud S. Jerry would flush things you're not supposed to flush down the toilet and would back up the sewage into mine and my neighbor's bathtubs and bathroom sinks. Eventually, he clogged his toilet so badly that he just ripped it from the wall and left it there. The cops came twice to my door to ask if I had seen Jerry lately and asked to search my apartment to make sure I wasn't hiding him. One day, while I was getting ready for work, he came into my apartment with another guy and tried to measure my walls for the renovation he was doing to combine his and my apartments into one unit. But don't worry, I could just live with him when it was all finished. Eventually, Jerry got evicted, but would still convince people to let him into the building. For months, his mugshot was pasted on all entrances saying not to let him in. Rang my doorbell at 4 a.m. over and over and asked me to go with him because there was an emergency and it was important. Went with him and he took me over to his car and started asking what I thought of it and looked very proud. In other words, this dude rang every apartment in the building at 4 a.m. to get people to look at his new car. F these people. I hate them. Busted by SWAT last summer. I had to call into work because of the barricades. No arrests, and never got the story on that. While we live in houses, we do not have fences around the backyard. They got a dog. They used to sit on the porch while the dog roamed the neighborhood. Then they just let him out to roam the neighborhood while in their house. In the winter, they'd put on a coat and leave him out for hours. Then they'll stand on their porch screaming, "Pete! Pete!" forever at 4 a.m. Pete has disappeared. I think someone else in the neighborhood took him in. Now they have another puppy named Zero. He's probably 12-ish weeks and, of course, wandering the neighborhood. We can hear them beating the H out of each other. So can people across the street. Police are out at least once a week arresting one of them. They bail each other out. Borrow jumper cables, never return them. Came over last week asking for jumper cables. My boyfriend told them that we already loaned them to him and they weren't returned. Neighbors told us they were going to sue us for accusing them of thievery. I have more. Much more. The Lawnmower Saga. Last summer, they came over and asked to borrow our riding lawnmower. My boyfriend currently works 75 plus hours a week during the summer, and the one thing that he despises is lawn work. So he made a deal. The neighbor can borrow our lawnmower anytime he needs it, as long as he mows our lawn each and every single time. That went smoothly for all of 3 weeks. Neighbor comes over, tells us that we need a new battery and that 2 of the blades are dull. Clearly, beggars can be choosers in his eyes. Whatever, my boyfriend goes out and spends money on a new battery and new blades for the mower. However, after doing that, the lawnmower just sat. My boyfriend absolutely hates leaving personal property out. He goes next door and tells the neighbor that the lawn needs to be mowed soon, that there was an agreement, and he's not standing by his agreement. We get the usual sob story about how he's sick, blah blah blah. Boyfriend tells him that we are leaving tomorrow on a Sunday and will be back the following Monday afternoon, and that when he gets back, he wants the lawnmower. If the neighbor can't do it, my boyfriend will just mow our lawn and be done with it. The neighbor tells us that he is definitely going to do it. Well, no. We get back Monday and the grass was growing around the lawnmower because it was never mowed. Boyfriend got straight out of his truck, mowed our lawn, leaving the perfect line between our property and theirs, and locked the mower up in the shed. Neighbor comes over 2 days later, going on and on about he was just about to do it. Boyfriend says that no, obviously he wasn't. He had 8 days to do it, it never got done, and why is he coming over 2 days after we locked it up? They ended up getting a ticket a few days later for the grass being too tall. Still never mowed it or took care of it. The city came out, mowed their lawn, and left them a hefty bill for it. Neighbors tried telling us it was our responsibility to pay it because we took away their opportunity to be self-sufficient. I moved onto a dirt road with several houses on it. My friend has lived down the road his whole life. The people next to my house only come up for the summer and are never there in the winter. When summer comes, however, there's multiple potholes on the road. Curious, I asked my friend. He said the neighbors come up in the summer and dig the holes themselves in order to slow down traffic. So that. Screamed obscenities through the walls at my children because they were talking too loudly in the middle of the day. Screamed at us through the walls in the middle of the night so we could see how it felt to be disturbed. Regularly dumped his old food out of his bathroom window into our shared backyard. Rodent infestation took place shortly thereafter. Stopped paying rent to our landlord because he felt that the landlord should have warned him that he might be able to hear his neighbors. Dumped his trash on our shared front porch. Landlord did not renew his lease. Took him to court, got his unpaid rent money back, plus additional payment for damages to the apartment. It was a glorious vindication. My a-hole of a next-door neighbor would leave her pit bulls out in the garden all day, every day, with no food or water and regardless of the weather. It would be a storm and she'd leave them both outside in the rain crying. It would be a heat wave and she'd leave them outside with no shade. Once I picked up on it, I began to knock on her door and ask her to bring the dogs in because leaving them outside was obviously neglect. She would tell me to mind my own business, but she'd yell at her kids to bring the dogs inside. Once I noticed that she didn't learn her lesson, I contacted the RSCPA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, over and over until they sent out a letter to her. She had the effing nerve to act like she had no idea why the RSCPA was contacting her. She came up to me in the street and was like, "Can you believe I got this letter saying I effing abuse my dogs?" I kept contacting them because despite knowing that the RSCPA were watching her, she still didn't change her behavior. She honestly didn't care about those poor dogs. They would jump at my fence whenever I was in the garden, practically begging. My sisters would jump the fence to give them bowls of water and feed them dog biscuits whenever she wasn't home. One day she was yelling and her kids were crying, so I went to see what was going on, and it turns out that the RSCPA were removing the dogs from her because of the neglect. Took a few months, but I was so happy to see them going to a better home. It started by letting her kids and animals run wild in my backyard. So I dropped $5,000 on a 6-foot privacy fence that my father-in-law and I built. Then she had her water turned off for lack of payment and began pooping in plastic bags and throwing them over my fence. When confronted about it, she kindly denied and then took to social media. I called the landlord and had an eviction notice served the next day. Ripped up and threw away my mom's sweet pea plant that she got from her friend who died of cancer. When she complained, he started ranting about how our garden is a disgrace and an embarrassment to the neighborhood and we need to replace all the grass and plants with concrete. P. Just recently, my new S-Bag neighbors have decided to throw dirty diapers in my driveway. We know it's them. They have the only diaper-wearing child on the block. My wife tossed them back into their driveway. 2 hours later, the same diapers reappeared in my driveway, followed by a third that was only a few feet from my door. I told my wife to leave them to me for when I got home from work. Upon arriving home, I tossed all 3 diapers onto their roof, likely never to be seen again. Until the humid Midwest summer bakes those effing diapers into a glorious colonic blasting S-storm of a smell for the D neighbors. If you want to watch the part 1, click the link here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and the comments. See you in the next video.